Frandson here with Dr. Toby Watkinson of San Diego, California. He has his own clinic here. It is phenomenal. Now, we go way back. I mean, I saw him when I was at a Scripps clinic in La Jolla, and he would take care of me. I'd see Dr. Yesus in here. So all the guys that were in the biz, he would take care of, and many, many more. He is probably one of the most brilliant docs you'll find, and has so many revolutionary systems that he uses to help facilitate healing with his chiro background, with his nutritional background, and then also acupuncture background. So let's turn over to you. I just want everyone to hear you talk, and I gotta stop talking because it's unbelievable. We're gonna start with number one, energy beyond and going away from the Wi-Fi. So talk to us about Wi-Fi and how it strains our energy.
Well, you know, fatigue is a huge issue today with everybody. You know, the one question to people when you ask them, you know, what do they want from care? You know, they said, "Oh, I'm tired all the time. I'm fatigued. Maybe I don't sleep well. Maybe I have stresses in my life." But fatigue is at the top of the list, and it's not so much about trying to go and repair their fatigue as it is about reducing the aggravants that steal energy from them.
There you go.
And that's the same thing. You know, you can extrapolate that over into several different areas, such as, for example, I want to strengthen my immune system. And I always kind of shake my head at people that say they want to strengthen their immune system. I know what they really mean, but what they're really saying is they want to jazz up their immune system. Well, jazzed up immune system is autoimmunity. You know, so what they want is they want a gas pedal that when they step on it, whether or not it's for energy, or whether or not it's for immunity, or whether or not it's for stress reduction, whatever it is, their body speeds up to meet that obstacle, speeds up to meet that aggravant, let's say, and then it goes back down to a normal 600-700 RPM, like your tachometer in your car, right, to where you can go forward in speed and set back to where you should be. Well, one of the big things I start on with people in my office and throughout my career of 40 years is getting rid of the electronic aggravants in your life. You know, for example, we turned on in my waiting room here where we are today, we turned on some of the fluorescent lights. Well, fluorescent lights are a tube of gas with a charge at either end that actually creates a light bulb that's never fully lit. So what's happening is it's creating a radio frequency. And you might remember maybe your father or your grandfather was a baseball fan, and they had a workbench in the garage, and they'd be out there and they'd have an AM radio listening to the ball game, and their radio would be going and what that was it was the arcing that was occurring because of the radio frequency from the fluorescent light tubes. Well, today we've gone well beyond the fluorescent light tubes, disastrously so, and that is that the brain rests at 7 to 8 hertz. 7 to 8 hertz, if you take a second and look at 7 to 8 hertz, you're going to see a peak, a little peak, 7 or 8 of those little peaks within a second you're going to see. Well, what's Wi-Fi? Wi-Fi is 2.4 billion to 5 billion peaks in that same second. Now, our brains can actually manage this 7 to 8 hertz, which is called a Schumann wave. But the deal is that we don't have the capacity to transcribe that 2.4 to 5 billion cycles per second that may happen from your Wi-Fi, and cell phone is 19 million cycles per second. So you take that second, you put 19 million little peaks on it. That's confusing for your brain. The brain only runs on sugar or ketones, and so when you're stressing your brain, even though it can't read it, it is making some sort of an attempt to interpret it. And in so doing, what happens to you is you're burning up a lot of sugar, and you're needing more sugar because sugar gets stored in your liver as glycogen. Glycogen gets converted to glucose. Glucose gets converted to glucose 6-phos, fructose 6-phos, you know, and on down the line to ultimately where it gets to be acetyl coenzyme A. Then it plugs into the Krebs cycle, and out the other end of the Krebs cycle, 1 molecule of glycogen equals 36 molecules of ATP, ATP being energy. So when people are saying they're out of energy, there's several different factors that are doing it. They're draining their adrenals and trying to resist the electronics that are happening to them in their environment. My office is painted with Wi-Fi blocking paint from Germany. It has Wi-Fi blocking film on the windows from Germany. And there are 44, we're in a high-rise building in La Jolla, California, and there are 44 Wi-Fis out here at the elevator. And in my office, I was just showing Justin on my phone. I opened my phone up. I said, I know we're not perfect here, but there was only one little 3-bar little guy that was showing up, and you can't practice applied kinesiology or muscle testing stuff in an environment where you're under constant bombardment from Wi-Fi, cell phone, whatever the case may be. There are ways of handling some of this. You know, you can Cat5 your Wi-Fi at home. I was telling Justin that we had a new neighbor moving into my neighborhood, and I went over and banged on his door because his printer I could pick up at my bed in my house across the street. And I went over and I told him, I said, I've got your Wi-Fi in my bed across the street at my house. He said, what did you say? I said, yeah. I said, would you mind turning off all your electronics, like your Wi-Fi and all that other junk, in your house at night so that it's not bothering I have my grandchildren living with me, and it's not bothering them, it's not bothering me, and I can sleep through it, because I can't sleep through Wi-Fi. I can't sleep through a cell phone. When you turn your cell phone off at night, which most people said, turn my cell phone off at night, are you crazy? I mean, that's my lifeline. I might get a call in the middle of the night. Well, that may be true, but the deal is you want to put it on airplane before you turn it off, because otherwise it's still receiving and transmitting and carrying on business as usual, even when the thing is off. So you wake up in the morning, it tells you right then when you turn it on, oh, you got all these calls, you got all this other stuff. But you don't need those in the middle of the night. And people who charge their cell phone at night on their bedstand next to their bed, they're never going to get really deep reparative sleep. What they're going to get is they're going to get twilight sleep. And twilight sleep is you're half asleep, you're half awake, and you can tell when people come in the room, but you can't actually open your mouth and say, oh, and by the way, honey, I'm asleep. You're not. You're only half asleep. And so you never really get the reparative situation that you should, the way we were designed. I had one of my staff members went camping last weekend, and she's my IT person. So, you know, most IT people are like married to this stuff. They have to have 12 different electronic gadgets on their bodies at all times. They need to have instant Wi-Fi, and the highest thing, they got magnifiers. And she used to be that way, but since she's worked for me for the past 16 years or so, she doesn't do that. But she went camping, and she said, it was amazing. I said, I don't like sleeping on dirt, but I said, so what was amazing about it? She said, there's no Wi-Fi out there. And I said, absolutely, and there's probably very few Schumann waves left out there either. But she said, no, it was really great. I slept like I've never slept before. And that's exactly what it is. Your brain is not getting bombarded by this sort of nonsense all the time. So the first line of defense against having good energy is by getting some of the aggravants for your energy off your back, out of your way, out of your head, and allowing your body to actually recuperate. Now, that's just one aspect of the energy drains that people can have, because beyond that, I have a little test kit that I use, because I use a lot of test files and kinesiology stuff, and I have what I call an aggravant kit. And in my aggravant kit is virus and bacteria and mold. In my aggravant kit is environmental toxins. I have a couple different guys in there for those. I have molds, yeast, funguses. I have mycotoxins. A lot of people don't understand mycotoxin. They think mycotoxin is a mold, but in actual fact, mycotoxin is produced by a mold. It's a toxin of a mold. And there's about 1,000 molds that don't produce a mycotoxin, and there's about 100 of them that do. And what happens is, if they're competing for the same piece of wallboard, what happens is the one that produces the mycotoxin produces this nasty, nasty poison that kills the other mold that's going after its wall. Now, what happens is you can have a mitigator come in and mitigate that mold, but the mycotoxin, which is sticky, is still in your environment. It's in your cloth furniture, it's in your clothing, it's on your carpet, it's on your wood furniture, but if you wipe it down, you can get out of there with it. But most people don't comprehend mycotoxins. And within this past year, I've had probably 15 cases of really acute and chronic mycotoxin poisoning and exposure that were missed by, I think it'd probably be inappropriate to use the name of the major clinics, but if you could think of the 5 most major clinics in this country and think of who they are, and then think about going there with a mycotoxin problem and coming home with no result from them because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with you, but you still felt horrible. That's a mycotoxin, and that's the state of the art for looking at mycotoxins in more traditional forms of medicine. So mycotoxin is one of the guys that I look at, and if I find it, I send a jar home for an initial sample of their air, and that's the worst way to actually get mold spores or mycotoxins. But I figure if it's there, then I can go to the next step, which is we gather some dust from their vents, we gather some dust from their vacuum, we send it to a lab in Texas. The lab in Texas tells us what it should be and what they are, and they take the most poisonous 4 of those guys. I haven't been wrong on anybody yet. The biggest problem is getting people to do something about it. One of the things that occurs is melanoma is actually one of the downstream results from a mycotoxin problem. I had a patient who had ALS, or was told she had ALS, and I said it's a mold problem, and basically it was a mycotoxin problem. I learned initially what I've come to learn more about in terms of mycotoxin, actually from an exposure that my son had in a 2-level penthouse downtown LA, and he's a hard charger, and he goes after everything, and signed a bunch of great music people, and now has bunches of Airbnb properties, nearly 100 of them. He couldn't get out of bed, and no one knew what was wrong with him. I ran thousands of dollars worth of more traditional tests, and finally I was working on sending some samples, because we did some of the samples of his place. We had an expert who knows mycotoxin come out to his place. But people who chronically have mycotoxin problems have no energy. They can't get out of bed in the morning. They can't go out on a date because they don't have energy. And they're calling it chronic fatigue, or they've got some other name on it, when in actual fact it has a cause. And that what happens in medicine is that they take a bunch of symptoms, and they have a slide rule for the symptoms, and they take the symptoms, they run it up and down the slide rule to get a name. And the reason they have to have a name is because the other leg of the slide rule is, what drug do we give them for the name? Now, what that's like is driving down the street and the red light comes on your dashboard, and you go, oh, I know the cure for that, traditional medicine. Reach under the dashboard, rip all those wires out, and that red light goes off. I don't have that problem anymore. And that's what 95% of the pharmaceuticals do, is they are taking a symptom of a bigger problem and basically ripping the red light off. Ripping all the wires out, there's no red light anymore. Because it's symptomatic medicine. It's not the kind of medicine that should be practiced, which is not practiced by very many people. I fell into it after 40 years of chasing similar things and so forth. And what I practice is I practice pathway medicine. Pathway medicine is gluconeogenic pathway, the tryptophan pathway, the phenylalanine pathway, the histamine pathway. There's 7 genes that actually excrete histamine. And if you go online and you read about it, you'll maybe find 2 sites in the entire world that actually know there's something more than DAO. DAO is a diamine oxide that actually works with getting rid of the H1, H2 problems with histamine. But there's MAO-A, MAO-B, HNMT, alcohol dehydrogenase, acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. That's all. Some of the HNMT is related back to the riboflavin aspect of MTHFR, which is always in the news today. But people are unaware that there's 7 genes, at least 7 genes, that are actually managing the downregulation and excretion of histamines. And histamines is another huge stealer of your energy. And most people think, oh, I can take a Benadryl and that will take care of me. Well, Benadryl actually uses up the very chemistry in your body that you need to actually excrete histamine. And in time, you'll be out of that. Benadryl won't work anymore. A lot of people take Benadryl to help them sleep because one of the biggest problems with histamine is it stimulates norepinephrine, and norepinephrine is a hormone of inflammation. That is probably the pinnacle of what's happening with everybody with any sort of a energy problem, is they have systemic chronic inflammation. They're over-secreting norepi, and in so doing is they're putting weight on around their middle that they can't get rid of, and they can't sleep at night because their brain's running off all the time, and their sympathetic dominance is up and their parasympathetic dominance is down, which is meaning they're wired and tired. And that is describing most of the people that you're going to run into who let this go for a while, and they come in, and it's not like 40 years ago when I saw people and they came in and they had one problem or maybe two problems. But the patients that come in today, they say, I have chronic fatigue, I'm reactive to candida, I have joint pain I have fibromyalgia, I have sinus problems, I've had a bunch of root canal work in my mouth, stealing energy again from them. I have these amalgams in my mouth. So when a patient comes to me, I don't say what brought you in. I have them write a narrative, which I don't read until after I examine them. Because if they come in and their narrative says, I have a knife in my shoulder, I go, here, I see your problem, it's a knife in your shoulder. That's not really figuring them out. I go through and I say, is there tryptophan in excess or deficiency? Tryptophan is the first chemistry in your brain chemistry that's going from tryptophan to 5-HTP to serotonin to N-acetylserotonin to, guess who, melatonin. So if you've got this problem in this pathway, you don't have a happy mood, you are melancholic or depressed, you've probably tried several SSRIs, which are serotonin reuptake inhibitor guys, which basically what they do is they flood the tryptophan 5-HTP serotonin pathway, but they burn out the enzymes that connect those guys. So the TPH and the HNMT and the HOMT, all those guys get burnt out, AADC, all those enzymes get burnt out, and you never get the melatonin. So one of the side nasty effects of those meds is people can't sleep after they take them for a while. And then you go back to the doctor and they exchange it for another one. But what's happening to you is that I look at those pathways, I look at phenylalanine through norepi and epi and dopamine. I take each one of those guys and I test it and see, because I look at the nutrients that connect them. Because what happens is those nutrients, when you give those medications, you burn out those nutrient connectors, the enzymes, and you will not be able to make 5-HTP out of tryptophan, no matter how much of you have, if you don't have the three nutrients that plug them together, and the enzyme TPH1. And TPH1 is tryptophan hydroxylase. It's formed in two areas of the body, one in the brain, one in the gut. It's a big item in autism because they're making their guts inflamed and they can't make TPH1 right, so they never get from tryptophan to 5-HTP the way they should.
So tell us about your supplements that go through those whole chains.
Well, I've created supplements that are for my patients. They're not in the marketplace. They're not on the internet. They're for my patients. And so I've created nutrients that actually follow these pathways, like the histamine guy and like the TPH and the tryptophan pathway, like the phenylalanine pathway. Some other ones I've made. A couple different ones, the genetic ones, and I do a lot of work with genes. And when you get a gene test done, and you look at it and it's homozygous this or that or the rest, you're really talking about you get one allele from your mom and one from your dad, and that's quotes your bad gene. But it's really not a bad gene. It's whether or not that gene is upregulated, downregulated, and what's going on with it. And the guys that control that regulation of that gene typically are the CYP genes, the COMT genes, the GSTP genes, the NAT1 and 2 genes, the GXTP genes, and the SOD genes. Those are the detoxifiers. So you can change the expression of a gene by actually upregulating the function of the regulatory gene, the detoxification gene, and that will actually prevent the expression of one of these other faulty genes, so that you don't go out and have your body parts removed because you've got one particular gene that says you're going to have breast cancer. You can actually change the expression of that by actually supporting your detoxification genes. And that's like, you know, people think you're married to your genes. You're really not. You can epigenetically alter the expression of these genes by actually upregulating your extent of an ability to detoxify, therefore downregulate expression. So in any event, that's another aspect of the energy picture. Now, there's also the environment in which you sleep. If you've got a flame retardant treated mattress, you're going to have problems sleeping. If you've got dust mites in your bed, you're going to have problems sleeping. All of those things are manageable. You can have your doctor write a letter to the manufacturer of the mattress, and they will make you a mattress without flame retardant in it. Not every company will do that, but a lot of very high quality mattress companies will do that. With it can be a letter from your chiropractor, it can be a letter from your medical doctor, your psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever.
Awesome. They
can actually write a letter stating that you're having problems with this, and they will leave it out of your mattress. But you know, energy, the big other part of energy is the stress mechanism. And what's happening, if we go back to the norepi issue for a moment, it's overdriving you in an attempt to downregulate inflammation. Most times the inflammation is gut related, but there's a whole nother facet of energy and inflammation and so forth, and it's dealing with peroxides and aldehydes. If you're a drinker and you go out, alcohol is converted to aldehydes. It uses zinc in the pathway to convert it. But aldehydes are relatives of that stuff called formaldehyde, which is how they pickle you when they put you in a box at the end. Okay? And so if you have an abundance of that, if you know some big drinkers who can't tell Tuesday from Thursday, it's an aldehyde problem from their conversion of the alcohol. The other big guy in that picture is basically the peroxides that come from decaying fats. Most of our brain is fat and water. And so when we're decaying fats, we're aging before our time. The cell coat is a bilipid membrane that is about energy and memory. And when we do a couple things to that cell coat, like put a biofilm on it, or don't have good fats entering and exiting the cell, what happens when we make energy, we're exchanging potassium for calcium in and out of the cell to make an electrical charge, to make your heart work. What's happening is those fats are peroxidizing, and peroxidized fats are the epitome of most of the mental memory and mental illness issues that we're seeing today. You know, Alzheimer's is huge. Memory centers are popping up everywhere. And there's a growth of this memory issue and so forth, because I believe that radio frequencies are contributing to the peroxidations of the fats in your brain. And the other aspect of it, if you can't get good quality fats to cross the blood-brain barrier and rebuild that brain cell, and the big problem is so many of the products on the market are oxidized, and oxidized products are basically ones that are going bad. They're becoming rancidified. The first step of rancidification is histamine. So go to your best grocery store and check the meat and check the vegetables and so forth, and so many of them are already going bad. And there is a here in California, there is a resurgence of farmers markets.
All right.
Every weekend you can find all these farmers markets. And there's one supplier that supplies to 22 different markets here in Southern California. And when they process a steak or a chicken or a turkey or lamb, they instantly vacuum pack that, and then they freeze it or they take it to the market and sell it, and there's no histamine in that. Where in all the other great guys that I checked, there's histamine in it. Your best and most expensive markets, they're histamines, because they're not vacuum packing that right away. And so that histamine is the first step for rancidification. And so if you're taking in meat, and fish is a big thing. And we do have here in Southern California a woman who I interviewed the other week about her salmon. She goes to Alaska every year, catches this stuff, freezes it, sells it at the farmer's market. I took one from a leading market here that was frozen from Alaska. I took hers, and I thawed them out exactly the same. I tested hers for histamine, 0 histamine. I tested the other big market brand, histamine.
Wow.
So even though it was, quotes, instantly frozen. And so the other aspects of diet is last year, 5.7 million cases of food poisoning were reported to the CDC. And that's just a glimpse of what's really there, because in actual fact, so many people get sick and they think they have a virus or a bacteria, and they have food poisoning. They aren't reporting to the CDC. They're just going through the diarrhea for a couple of days and think they're sick. So that number of 5.7 million, the CDC has a range that they say it could be as high as 19 million, you know, because people are dealing with that. Now, rancidity is a neurotoxin. So most people who are getting migraine headaches are actually reacting to the histamine, which has gone over the edge and become rancidity, and their histamine, their headache, their migraine is in actual fact a rancidity headache, a neurotoxic headache. So getting those people onto a diet that excludes histamine foods. Some of the high histamine foods are sweet potatoes, spinach, tomatoes. I mean, have you tried to wrestle a tomato out of a person's hand or out of their diet? They don't want to give up tomatoes. But the diet that I have gets rid of all their histamine, which is inflammatory. It gets rid of all their nightshades, which are all inflammatory. It gets rid of their glutamates. And you know, when you pick up that can at the natural market that says tuna in water, you turn over the back of it and read the very fine print, and many of them say in broth. And then if you get out the big catalog of labeling laws, you can find that, wow, broth can have MSG in it. What's MSG? Glutamate. What's glutamate is something that it's a neurostimulant. It should convert to GABA, which is peacefulness, in the face of vitamin B6 and glycine. But what happens is, in autistic kids, glutamates are over the moon, but you can't go, like soup starters are glutamates, and broth is glutamate, and you go down the list, there's 15 million foods that people are eating every day that are full of glutamate, and then they wonder why they can't turn their brain off, but yet they have no energy. And they can't reach that peaceful zone because they never produce GABA, because they're burning up all their B6 and their glycine on some other nonsense like detoxification. The liver and toxicity is the other big robber of energy of people. I think most people in the health industry today, except for the doctor on the corner that you're going to go see for your, quotes, medical problems, are preaching phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 liver detoxification. Phase 1 being fat-soluble stuff, phase 2 being water-soluble, phase 3 being bile acid pathways. And I check those and have developed products on all of those, but I check those on everybody to be sure that in fact they are able to go through that cascade without poisoning themselves, because if they were to treat phase 1 with all the nutrients it needs, before treating phase 2, they're going to end up in a pickle, because they're going to be delivering very toxic material to phase 2 before it's ready to receive it. Wow. And a lot of people don't comprehend that. The peroxide issue and the aldehyde issue does not seem to be going through a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 detox pathway. You would think it would, because phase 1 is fat-soluble stuff, and we're really dealing with the fat-soluble stuff. But the problem is that most of the fat-soluble toxins are being held in the fat, and the only way to get them out of the fat is to exchange them for healthier fats going in. And so there are ways to do that, but there's so many products on the market that are rancid. And during that little break we had with this, I went next door and received a delivery of some liposomal products which have to be shipped refrigerated, because otherwise they're going to go bad. And that's kind of a warning too when people buy a lot of stuff off the internet. And I had a patient the other day, I recommended a particular product and she didn't get it from me, she got it someplace off the internet. And those things are not cared for in the manner in which, and they could take it and then start consuming it, and in actual fact it's not going to do for them what it should do, because of the fact that the fat aspect of the liposomal aspect of it is oxidized. It's already gone bad. It's already making histamines. As we said, basically, histamine is the first step on the course to rancidification.
Well,
so, anyway, yeah.
I mean, I have a product that I just got. I'm going to have to get it tested. And you could do remote testing as well. They don't have to come to San Diego?
I can, but with a new patient, I like to see them in person for the first visit.
Okay.
And then we can figure out what their needs are after that.
Okay.
But, you know, a lot of times we have patients in every state but 3 and 15 foreign countries. So, you know, at some point they came here, you know, whether it was from South Africa or whether it was Nicaragua or whether or not it was England or wherever it was, they came here once upon a time. Because I deal with a lot of very chronically ill people that have been to, I had one woman come in, she'd been to 50 doctors. She was referred to me by a doctor on the East Coast. And because I don't take the history up front, I basically find out what's wrong, and then I say, this is what I'm finding on you, and then now tell me why you came. She was so excited to not have to repeat for the 51st time her entire history, and she said in the first 10 minutes of my looking at her, I told her what was wrong with her, which took all these other guys, you know, some time to come up with. But anyway, no, the whole way of looking at a person in a systematic manner, it's a systems approach. Right. Whether it be the brain chemistry, whether it be the detoxification, whether it be the hormones. So I go through all your hormones begin with cholesterol, and then they go to pregnenolone and progesterone and hydroxypregnenolone and progesterone, and then androstenedione and diol, and then estrogen 1, 2, 3, and DHEA and testosterone going to estrogen and so forth. But I have all the nutrient connectors for those, because in more traditional testing of hormones, they say, oh, they test about 4 and then they make a statement about you. The big issue is the breakdown of the estradiol and estrone, the breakdowns of those guys to ultimately go to phase 2 liver detox. And what the nutrients are, because number one, the best treatment for cancer is prevention, okay? What's happening to us today is we are unable to excrete the toxins that are in our environment, that are in our food, and it used to only be old people that got cancer. Right. And now it's young people that get cancer. The number one killer of children after accident is cancer. Over 50% of the children are chronically ill. And what's happening is our nutrient pool is being sucked dry because of our exposure. There's like 22, 25 things in phase 2 liver detox. There's a very short stack of things in phase 1 detox, except for the fact that if you don't add in a whole bunch of antioxidants in there and you take phase 1 and you clear it up and dump those guys right on phase 2, you'll cause problems because they need lots of oxidants to get into phase 2. And so when you take a look at the number of things and you picture a nice healthy pool, let's say, of all the nutrients so that phase 1 can pull from it, phase 2 can pull from it, phase 3 can pull from it, and then all the nutrients that are required for all the downregulation of gene expression in histamine. There's I have 22 things I think in that nutrient, that one nutrient that support those 7 genes for alcohol dehydrogenase, acetaldehyde, and all those other guys in that pathway, the HNMT and so forth. All of those guys are having 3, 4, 5 different nutrients in each one of those, and your nutrient pool just can't keep up with what's going on today, whether it be Roundup or whether or not it be, vaccine issues, or whether or not it be a diesel fuel, and then all your genetic aspect of this is getting drained, so therefore you're ending up with all these gene abnormalities that are not abnormalities from the standpoint of them testing your gene to tell you whether or not you have 2 alleles or 1. It's really the down or up regulation of the gene itself. And that's not being looked at. They're just saying, you have this gene, therefore you're going to have that. That's not the case. I had a little patient the other day, a 8-year-old boy, and he's been tested for the last 2 or 3 years for what's wrong with him, and nobody found what was wrong with him. And what's it turned out to be? Mycotoxin. Mycotoxin. Another fellow went to one of these big clinics that is the Taj Mahal of medicine to find out what was wrong with him. What was the problem? End of the day, they didn't find it. They sent him home, said he had no problem. It was mycotoxin. Another fellow came in who is trembling like this, in his early 30s. His speech is disrupted. He's been scanned and tested and so forth. What did they come up with? Nothing. They said basically you need to talk to a shrink. Mycotoxin.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And we're not equipped to deal either evaluating and because these things are not being taught. There's labs out there doing this research, but the medical schools are falling behind in really looking at what's causing people to be ill. The pharmaceutical companies is controlling that and really guiding it, and their big market right now is, guess what? Vaccines.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And they are setting up a whole nother problem in this, because they're again draining the nutrient pool and changing the gene structure of who they're working with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, unbelievable information. You guys watch this 10 times over because it's that rich in nutrients for you and your life and your family. Thank you so much, Dr. Toby, for taking us beyond and allowing us to understand just so in depth on how to actually take your energy beyond. And you guys, we'll have links to find Dr. Toby here in San Diego and La Jolla, California. And it's unbelievable information. And you guys, we're only featuring the best in the business, and obviously, hands down, you're exceptional. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your energy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. Yeah. All right, and thank you all for going beyond with us.